The storm had passed, but the sky still looked like it hadn't made up its mind. A single crack of light pierced through the clouds, catching the edge of my newly built deck. The lake below reflected nothing, just a dark sheet of glass holding its breath. I leaned against the railing, coffee steaming in my hand, and tried to let the silence seep in. Real silence. Not the kind you get with noise-canceling headphones or soundproof windows. The kind where even your heartbeat feels like it's intruding. 18 years. That's how long it took to claw my way out of the tech startup world. 3 failed launches, $1 billion exit, and a heart attack scare that reminded me I was not invincible. So when I found this cabin tucked between old growth pines and legal obscurity, it wasn't just a real estate win. It was a full-body sigh. The cabin was perfect in that haunting way old buildings can be. The previous owner had passed away 2 years ago, and something about the property felt unfinished. But I liked that. Unfinished meant unclaimed, unmessed with. My name was on the deed now. My rules. Or so I thought. I had just taken my second sip of coffee, that rich, nutty roast I save for moments like this, when I heard it. Not wildlife. Not the hush of waves. Heels. Sharp, deliberate, and fast. Crunching gravel like it owed her money. I turned. There she was, storming up the hill in a perfectly tailored suit that screamed boardroom warrior, not woodland neighbor. Blonde hair coiled into a bun, so tight it looked like a hurt. One hand clutched a clipboard, the other a large handbag that somehow gave off the vibe of both designer fashion and emotional warfare. She didn't slow down, didn't wave, didn't smile. I stepped forward slightly, offering the polite half-nod that new neighbors exchange. She blinked at it like I'd handed her a dead bird. "You're Oliver Reed?" she said, scanning the porch like she expected someone else to appear, someone who belonged here. "I am. Just moved in 3 days ago." I gestured toward the deck. "You're Laura Kent, president of the Willow Lake Homeowners Association." Her voice dropped on the last few words, like she'd just laid a trap and was waiting to see if I'd step in it. I didn't. Instead, I said, "Nice to meet you," because that's what you're supposed to say when someone introduces themselves, even if they're radiating the kind of energy that makes dogs bark from inside houses. Laura's eyes moved behind me, past the porch swing, past the firewood stack, and locked on the waterfront. Her face tightened. "You're aware that your dock sits on what's traditionally been considered community shoreline?" I took a long sip of coffee. "I'm aware that I have a property deed that says otherwise." She smiled. Not a warm smile. The kind that says, "This will be fun for me." There's been a long-standing agreement with the previous owner. An understanding. "You may not be familiar with the expectations here, Mr. Reed, but we do enforce a certain continuity." That's a pretty word for trespassing. She flinched slightly, not enough for most people to notice, but I wasn't most people. I negotiated deals with billionaires. I knew a bluff when I saw one, and I knew fear when I smelled it under a layer of perfume and false authority. But I wasn't ready for how hard she'd push, and Laura Kent wasn't ready for what she was about to step into. 3 days passed. The silence was still there, but now it felt like it was watching me. I spent most of that week settling in, unpacking boxes, hanging tools in the shed, trying to convince myself that the absurd little showdown with Laura Kent had been a one-time thing. A strange welcome to the neighborhood moment. Nothing more. Then the notices started. The first one was tucked under my door like a passive-aggressive love letter. Violation number 001. Unauthorized exterior decor, apparently. The welcome mat I'd picked, a hand-woven red jute rug that reminded me of autumn leaves, was not an approved neutral tone under Willow Lake's HOA aesthetic ordinance. Fine, $50. Payable within 10 days. I actually laughed. Out loud. I texted my lawyer and asked him if I was legally obligated to take HOA fashion advice. He replied with a gif of a dumpster fire and the words "star file." Take photos. By the end of the week, that file had grown into a spreadsheet. Violation number 002. Grass length 3.75 inches. Maximum allowable 3.25 inches. Violation number 003. Wind chimes in excess of 50 dB. Measured, allegedly, at 6:13 a.m. Violation number 004. a disruptive lawn ornament. The offending object? A cast iron frog holding a lantern. That one made me pause. It had belonged to my mother. Laura couldn't have known that, of course, but it still felt personal. So I stopped laughing. Instead, I built a digital archive. Every notice, every timestamp, every photograph. I logged the GPS coordinates of each cited infraction like I was prepping for a federal case. Because, in a way, I was. The fines weren't the issue. I could afford them. What gnawed at me was the precision, the daily, almost militaristic rhythm of it. Laura was trying to break something in me. Not my wallet, my will. And she wasn't working alone. I began to notice the pattern. The same gray sedan driving slowly past my cabin each morning. A man walking his dog at the same time each afternoon, always stopping to adjust his shoelaces just long enough to study my fence line. Drones, or maybe birds, hovering a little too long overhead. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. Then I found the drone controller in a kid's backpack near the lake. A kid who sprinted the second he saw me approaching. I wasn't just being watched. I was being hunted in khakis and clipboards. Then came the community bulletin. Printed on thick cardstock, slid into every mailbox. Preserving the integrity of Willow Lake. A message from the HOA president. It was a full-page essay warning of influxes of non-compliant homeowners and the danger of urban attitudes polluting the harmony of the lakeside tradition. My name wasn't mentioned, but the photo of a red doormat and a frog statue made things clear. I was the infestation. That night, I lit a fire in the stone hearth and sat in the glow, flipping through the printed violation stack. My eyes kept returning to the same name, signed with theatrical flair at the bottom of each letter. Laura M. Kent. HOA president, how did a person like her end up with so much control? Was it pure ego? Or something else? I didn't have to wait long for clues. The next morning, while inspecting my dock for fresh chalk marks or measuring tape residue, I met Tim. He appeared like a ghost. Wiry frame, sun-leathered skin, a baseball cap that looked older than the HOA itself. He was watering his tomatoes next door, but his eyes were on me. "You're the new one," he said. Not quite a question. "I guess that's me." He nodded toward my cabin. That place used to belong to Walker. You know what kind of man he was? I hesitated. Not really. Just what the deed says. Tim looked down at his garden, then back up at me. And for the first time, his voice dropped to a whisper. "He didn't sell you a cabin, son. He handed you a powder keg. And Laura's the match." The storm returned that night. Not in the sky, but in my mind. I lay in bed, the violation notices stacked like headstones on my desk, the flicker of firelight catching Laura Kent's signature over and over again. She was burying me in paperwork, smothering me with rules that felt tailor-made for psychological warfare. Tim's warning echoed louder than the wind outside. "He didn't sell you a cabin, son. He handed you a powder keg." The name Charles Walker kept cycling through my thoughts. I hadn't given the man much attention beyond the real estate transaction. But now he felt like a shadow, still living in the corners of the cabin. By morning, I had a mission. I brewed a pot of bitter coffee, pulled on a flannel jacket, and drove 2 towns over to the county archives. If there was a ghost in my house, I wanted to know what he was hiding. The clerk at the counter barely glanced up as I requested property files on Walker. "Architect, right?" she said, thumbing through a drawer. "A lot of red tape around his stuff. Brilliant guy. Bit of a pain in the ass." She handed me a box labeled Walker, Charles, estate records / building permits. Inside, a maze of blueprints, annotated maps, permit letters, and, most bizarrely, dozens of newspaper clippings about corrupt developers, building disputes, and lawsuits where Walker appeared as either a whistleblower or some kind of architectural vigilante. He'd once designed a city plaza with a faulty drainage system that only activated during ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Another time, he wired a corporate lobby with motion sensors that triggered hidden speakers playing pre-recorded tapes of shady board meetings whenever someone used the elevator. But the real discovery was buried in a manila folder at the bottom of the box. A conservation easement, filed 8 years ago, on my property, specifically on the waterfront Laura was desperate to access. My hands froze on the paper. I reread the language twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. This land shall remain permanently protected from any development, commercial or private, with violations subject to federal fines not to exceed $10,000 per day. Signed by Charles Walker. Witnessed. Stamped. Federally logged. I stared at the map, heart thundering. The conservation area wasn't just an easement. It was a wall. A trap. A legal bear trap waiting for a greedy foot to step in. Suddenly, Laura's obsession made sense. She didn't just want to enforce HOA standards. She needed this land, and she couldn't get it without breaking federal law. I drove back in silence, the easement documents folded neatly on my passenger seat like a loaded weapon. The lake shimmered ahead, calm as glass, the way it always looked before things broke. Back at the cabin, I poured myself a drink stronger than coffee and stared at the photos of the violations on my wall. My home had turned into a war map, and I finally knew the terrain. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against better judgment, I answered. "Mr. Reed," came the voice. Smooth, but forced, like someone tried to remain calm while holding a lit fuse. "You'll be receiving a notice shortly. A disciplinary hearing has been scheduled. Mandatory attendance. Non-compliance will result in legal escalation." I paused. Who is this? But the line had already gone dead. 10 minutes later, the notice appeared on my doorstep. Certified envelope. Thick paper. Bold typeface. A mock trial. Hosted, of course, in Laura Kent's dining room. But something about the letter made my stomach twist. The HOA header looked off. Underneath the logo, a faint stamp had been scribbled out. Walker's name and address, sloppily overwritten in Laura's handwriting. My eyes caught one more detail, a symbol in the top corner. A tiny architectural seal. It matched the watermark on the conservation easement. Charles Walker had marked it, like he knew this letter, or one like it, would eventually come. I sat down slowly. This wasn't a property dispute. This was a message from a dead man. Laura Kent's dining room smelled like lemon polish and control. She'd set it up like a courtroom. Long mahogany table, high-backed chairs, nameplates, even a pitcher of cucumber water, as if presentation could hide the absurdity of what was about to happen. 3 board members sat beside her. 2 stiff men with HOA pins on their lapels and a nervous woman who kept fidgeting with a clipboard. I stepped inside, calm on the outside, the easement file in my briefcase like a grenade with the pin halfway pulled. "Mr. Reed," Laura said with that politician smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "Please have a seat. Let's begin." I didn't move. Instead, I set a small digital recorder on the table and pressed the red button. As per Willow Lake HOA rules, Section 4.7, I'll be recording this meeting for documentation purposes. That got their attention. The woman on the end blinked. One of the men looked down at his papers, as if reconsidering everything he was about to say. "Laura?" She didn't flinch, but her jaw locked tight. "This is not a legal deposition," she said coolly. "No, irapia. But it might become one." We stared at each other. Not neighbors now, but predators circling the same territory. The hearing began. Laura flipped through my violations with theatrical precision. A red doormat. Wind chimes audible after 9 p.m. unapproved lawn decor. "A grotesque iron frog with a lantern," she said, wrinkling her nose. Each fine escalated, each tone more accusatory. She spun a narrative that I was the destabilizing element in an otherwise harmonious community. Then she said the words that cracked something deep inside me. "Due to persistent noncompliance, the HOA board hereby issues a formal lien threat against Mr. Reed's property. Failure to comply within 30 days will trigger financial recovery actions." I sat very still. There it was. Theft, dressed in legalese. A $1,500 fine for wind chimes and doormats, and the power to seize my land if I refused. I looked at the board members. 2 of them couldn't meet my eyes. The third, the woman, looked regretful. But she didn't speak. Laura leaned forward, smug and gleaming. "We suggest cooperation. For the good of the community." I unzipped my briefcase. "Actually," I said, placing the easement packet on the table, "I think this might be good for the community." Laura's eyes flickered as I began laying out maps, federal records, and survey documents with a deliberate calm that betrayed none of the adrenaline pounding in my chest. This cabin's previous owner, Charles Walker, filed a federal conservation easement on the waterfront section of my land. 8 years ago. It's legally protected. No development. No construcción. No exceptions. I pointed to the stamped federal seal. Any violation carries a $10,000 per day fine. Minimum. Silence. Laura's smile fractured for a split second. The men exchanged glances. The woman leaned forward to read the seal. Her eyes widened. This document is public record, I continued. Filed with the Department of Environmental Protection. The same section of land you've been referencing. The dock, the access path, it's all covered. You knew this. Or should have. Then I pulled out the kicker. A photo, grainy security footage I'd captured a week earlier. Laura, on my land. Pointing. Gesturing to 2 men with measuring tape. Unauthorized surveying of protected land. On camera. The woman on the board gasped. Laura, she whispered, did you? Laura stood up, so fast her chair scraped hardwood. This is irrelevant. That easement is outdated. Invalid. Walker told you? I interrupted. You mean the man who's been dead for years? The one who left behind a conservation landmine that you just stepped on? A long beat. Laura didn't blink, but something in her eyes shifted. Panic, maybe, or rage. Or both. She turned to the board. This is a distraction. He's trying to undermine the HOA with scare tactics. The decision stands. But the cracks had formed. One board member flipped through the documents again. Another took notes. The power Laura had always wielded, with a look, with a smile, with a threat, suddenly felt brittle. I'll be forwarding this to legal counsel, I said quietly, and to the county, and if necessary, the press. Laura's voice sharpened. You don't understand what you're doing. No, I said, but Charles Walker did. I didn't see the construction crew arrive. I'd been out grabbing groceries and returned to find trucks idling on the gravel, steel posts driven into the earth along my waterfront, and men in neon vests unpacking tools like they were building the future or erasing mine. And there, in the middle of it all, barking orders like a general drunk on power, stood Laura Kent. She didn't see me at first. She was pointing to a stretch of the shoreline, clipboard in hand, gesturing with sweeping motions, exactly where the conservation easement said no human hand should ever touch. The wind shifted. She turned. We locked eyes across the yard. Her confidence didn't falter. She smiled. Just getting started, Mr. Reed. Don't worry, we'll sort the permits later. My mouth went dry. Behind her, one of the contractors hesitated. Ma'am, we were told this was approved access, but there's some conflicting information on the land status. There's no conflict, she snapped. I'm the HOA president. This is community land. I stepped closer, voice steady. It's federally protected land. And you're trespassing. Laura's smile faltered for the first time in weeks. You don't want to escalate this, Oliver. I didn't respond. I just pulled out my phone and pressed record. The contractor's eyes widened. Another one stepped back, glancing nervously toward the lake. Within 40 minutes, the cavalry arrived. Clara Stone, my attorney, pulled up first in a sharp black sedan, stepping out like she'd been waiting years to wage this kind of war. In her hand, the easement documents, printed in duplicate. Behind her, a county surveyor, then a building inspector. Then, finally, a sheriff's deputy. They fanned out with quiet purpose. Measuring tape, boundary markers, clipboard questions. One by one, the officials turned their attention to Laura Kent. Clara approached her directly. Mrs. Kent, you are directing unpermitted construction on federal conservation land. That is a violation of Environmental Protection Code 42.18. Subsection B. You are subject to fines of $10,000 per day. Bit of violation. The color drained from Laura's face. But still, she stood firm. I have authority. The community, you had authority, Clara said flatly. Now you have liability. The sheriff handed her a citation. The building inspector ordered an immediate work stoppage. The contractors dropped their tools and backed away like the earth had turned radioactive. Neighbors started appearing. Tim, Mrs. Patterson, the Rodriguez family, a dozen more. They lined the edge of my property like spectators at a public reckoning. Phones were out, cameras rolling. Laura turned toward them, voice rising. "You don't understand what he's done. Walker promised," Clara cut in. "Walker promised to protect this land. And he did. This easement isn't just a legal wall, it's a trap for anyone who tried to steal what wasn't theirs." Laura spun to face me. "You think you've won?" I didn't answer. The surveyor raised his hand. "The posts are 3 feet into restricted land. Documented. GPS tagged." The sheriff nodded. "This is going to the district attorney." Clara stepped up beside me. "You might want to call a lawyer, Laura. And not the HOA kind." For the first time since I moved here, Laura Kent looked small, diminished. Her perfectly curated persona cracked. Not with rage, but disbelief. Like the story she told herself for years had just stopped making sense. She turned in slow circles, eyes scanning the crowd, the lake, the documents in the official's hands. Then she dropped her clipboard. Just let it fall. No words, no defense, and walked to her car. Neighbors parted like water around her. No one spoke. No one reached out. As she drove away, Tim stepped beside me. "Walker told me he was building something that would teach a lesson someone wouldn't forget," he said softly. "Didn't think I'd live to see it." I glanced down at the fence posts, the torn-up shoreline, the silent crowd, and finally at the calm, undisturbed water. "Neither did I," I said. "But he built it well. The lake is quiet again. But it's not the same silence I found when I first arrived. That was the silence of escape, of running from the noise of a life I no longer wanted. This silence is different. Earned. Baton. The kind that settles in after something dark has been dragged into the light and stripped of its power." 3 weeks after the incident, Laura Kent resigned as HOA president. Technically, she stepped down due to personal reasons. But everyone knew better. You could feel it in the way neighbors began making eye contact again. Doors that had stayed shut for years now cracked open with cautious smiles. A community once paralyzed by passive fear had started breathing again, like an entire neighborhood had come out of hiding. The new HOA board invited Clara and me to a community meeting. They wanted transparency, fair enforcement, and forgiveness. I didn't speak, but I watched, and I listened. That was enough. Laura never returned to Willow Lake. Her property went up for sale in silence, handled by a realtor from 2 counties away. Some said she moved to be closer to family. Others said she fled pending legal trouble. I didn't care. What mattered was that the land was safe. Not just mine, but all of it. Because Charles Walker hadn't just left me a cabin. He'd left a weapon. A beautifully engineered truth buried in paper and patience. A masterpiece disguised as wilderness. And I was just the final piece of his plan. Clara once called him a legal architect, but I think that undersells it. What Walker built wasn't just defense, it was philosophy. A belief that greed always reveals itself. That the most powerful resistance isn't violence or vengeance, it's exposure. You let people show who they really are. Then you give the truth a megaphone. That's what broke Laura in the end. Not the fines, not the sheriff, not even the easement. It was the mirrors we held up to her, and the fact that for the first time, she had to look. A few nights ago, I found something wedged deep in the attic, an old envelope with my name on it. My full name, written in careful script, Oliver Maxwell Reed. The handwriting was Walker's. Inside was a letter. No briting, no signature, just a message that read, "This land needs a keeper. Someone with enough fight to survive it, and enough stillness to listen to it. If you're reading this, you're both." I read it 3 times before folding it away. The next morning, I walked the perimeter of the conservation boundary with a fresh stake and a new sign Clara had drawn up. Stop sign protected land. Federal easement in place disturb at your own risk. I didn't do it for fear. I did it as a promise. A month later, I threw a neighborhood barbecue. First time anyone had done one in years. Tim brought fresh tomatoes. Mrs. Patterson made lemon bars that disappeared in 10 minutes. The Rodriguez kids helped me hang lanterns from the trees, their laughter echoing across the lake like something sacred. We didn't talk about Laura. We didn't need to. Some ghosts don't deserve our breath. Later that night, long after everyone had gone home and the embers had died down, I stood on the deck with a drink in hand and watched the moonlight touch the water. Still, silent, but not empty. Somewhere out there, I like to believe Walker's spirit is watching this place. Not like a haunting, but like a guardian. The kind who fights his final battle through someone else's hands. The kind who writes his revenge into zoning laws and trust deeds. I raised my glass to the darkness. Hell of a masterpiece, Charles. I whispered. You win. The wind rustled through the trees, just once like it was laughing. Then everything went still again. And this time, I let it hold me.